Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this CP Training of Trainers course. This sequence is on making a slideshow and other visual aids. In this sequence, we are going to cover 4 points. 1. Preparing and using a slideshow. 2. Integrating images and audio visuals into the media. 3. The Gestalt theory. And 4. Graphic signs and texts. Preparing and using a slideshow. Advantages of a slideshow, such as PowerPoint, PPT. Optimal quality of visual presentation. Easy integration of various types of illustrations, such as drawings, photos, graphics, videos, and sounds. Quick display of large amount of information. Reduction of transition times between different subjects, which allows a faster pace of presentation during a presentation. Slide presentations, such as PowerPoint, are widely used in a training course when introducing topics and during presentations. Note: it should not be the only medium used during training. Using a slideshow alternated with a flip chart and question and answer session facilitates the memorization and understanding of a message. Here are some typical examples of the possibilities offered by the use of PowerPoint. It's much easier to illustrate pest damage, a cultural practice, or an effect of water on the soil, or to present graphs and diagrams than to describe them in words. We can take advantage of the technical possibilities offered by computers. Easy discovery of information without too much manipulations, graphics. But it is also necessary to point out some disadvantages of this type of tool. Its use requires equipment. Its cost is higher than a flip chart, for an example. Once created, it is difficult to introduce changes live during the presentation. In fact, the sequence imposes its rhythm through the succession of slides. Beware of the cinema effect. The dynamics of a slideshow promote a visual perception of the presentation, accelerate the pace, and risk placing participants in the position of spectators, making them inactive. This advantage can be offset by using slide animations. How to use this tool? A number of rules must be applied to ensure that the content is properly prepared. Put a title on each slide. Maintain consistency between slides. Avoid changing the background color for each slide. Choose a slideshow template whose background color will be adapted to the brightness and lighting of the room where the presentation is made. Use colors, sizes, bold, and font to make the elements stand out. Use no more than 2 fonts per slide. Do not use underlining, which breaks the fluency of reading. Choose a font size of at least 28 point for headings and 20 point for text. Ideally, only 1 theme per slide, 1 idea per line, 6 lines of 8 words, no more than 50 words per slide maximum. Beyond 50 words, the amount of information presented is too large, and the legibility of the slide and therefore comprehension of the message is poor. During preparation, do not hesitate to count the number of words and modify your text accordingly. Remember that participants will retain very little of the text you have written so carefully and posted for a few seconds. Ready for a little game? How many F's in the text below? You have 10 seconds to count the F's you have seen in the following sentence. Really? You've only seen 3? There were 6 F's in that text. Your brain perceives the proposition as a whole, not as a collection of letters, O and I and F. You should know that counting 3 F's is normal. It is the score of the majority of people. 6F is exceptional. Less than 3F, then change your glasses. Don't overuse animation and transition effects. These quickly become annoying for the audience. Minimize sound effects intended to wake up the participants. These are often considered infertile. Never paste word or tables. Always comment on illustrations, figures and tables, etc. Ideally, present the columns and rows of the table first before the content. Include the legends of any graphs. Use contrasting colors for graph elements, histograms, pie charts, lines, bars. Use as much space as possible to let your presentation breathe. Don't fill it with text. Choose visible colors. Adapt the background and text colors to ensure legibility. Don't hesitate to uncover the contents progressively. Use animation functions. Check animations and layout when transferring to another PC. Check the proper functioning and arrangement of the equipment to optimize visibility for all participants. Move the projector as far away from the screen as possible to maximize the projection space. And plan for a power outage. Integrate images and audio visuals. Why use these tools? Between what the trainer wants to say, knows how to say, thinks to say, can say, and says, and what the participants have heard, listened to, understood, some of the initial content may be lost and not memorized. Personalizing your speech, introducing keywords, energizing the message, maintaining attention, enhancing an idea, synthesizing are all challenges of animating a training. Images and audio visuals can 1. Illuminate the messages you want to present in a lively way. These media can make training programs more attractive and effective by presenting testimonies close to the participants' experiences, by allowing identification with the people shown in the media, by evoking positive feelings, by using judicious humor, by challenging participants. 2. Be produced locally at a reasonable cost. When reproduced in large quantities, they can support very large-scale training programs. 3. Show in a concrete way, overcoming the obstacles of illiteracy, very complex techniques or procedures before putting them into practice. 4. Explore in a single session the different stages of a whole process, e.g., a crop cycle from sowing to harvesting, illustrating the agricultural techniques specific to each stage, such as identifying the problems of deforestation and showing the best solutions to them. 5. Transport participants to remote locations where they could never go. Judicious use of this means of communications makes it possible to abolish time and space. How to use images. 1. Select an image or audiovisual document for a specific audience and purpose. It is then necessary to distinguish between the different types of objects that these media make it possible to achieve. Cognitive objectives. To bring participants to take note of information, to understand mechanisms, biological, chemical, sociological, economic. To analyze, evaluate, and synthesize information about a problem. Psychomotor objectives, such as gestures. To lead participants to acquire standardized, predefined gestures or to adopt personal gestures. psychosocial objectives, to make participants aware of a problem, to take a stand on a problem, to apply new behaviors, either in relation to themselves or to others. 2. Analyze the medium to assess its usefulness. Does it have a real impact on learning? Does the material contain errors and/or inconsistencies? Does it contain essential messages? Are there biases, a passionate tone, a lack of nouns that may have a negative impact on participants' learning? 3. Building a learning sequence around the medium. This involves developing a sequence of activities with precise instructions and objectives adapted to the level and the needs of the target audience. 4. Design motivational sequences that mobilize all the learners' skills. It's not a question of falling asleep in front of the television. It's about using media, commenting on them, and/or encouraging participants' reactions. 5. When using these materials during training, you should check the control and proper functioning of the audio-visual equipment before the start of the training session. Make sure that all participants can see the screen. Adapt the lighting to the room. Adapt the sound to the audience and the room. Limit screening time to 30 minutes. Making a visual aid. Gestalt theory. As we have seen, trainers will have to make a number of presentations, often in a group, using visual aids, such as PowerPoint, OpenOffice, images, videos. These visual presentation materials must have a number of qualities. Your own image also depends on them. Gestalt theory can help to identify these qualities. Although the German word Gestalt can be translated as form, so Gestalt theory literally means theory of form. It actually represents something much more complex, which no word translates exactly in any language. So the term Gestalt has been related to English, French, Russian, and Japanese. Gestalt theory suggests that images impose their structure on the individual who looks at them. Images can act on visual perception and therefore on the understanding of a message. The forms chosen are not neutral, as they generate a number of implicit effects. They may disturb the quality of communication by introducing noise. In this paragraph, we will consider 3 principles involved in visual perception and therefore in the proper understanding of an image. How many legs does this elephant have? What do you see in this picture? A face? 2 faces kissing? Observe this image carefully. This image is composed of circles, but it seems to undulate. Fix on the center of the image. How do you feel? Sensitive souls refrain from looking. Principle 1. The perception of form is global and not detailed. The different parts of an image are articulated with each other and are subject to all these elements. This is why it is difficult to distinguish the number of legs of the elephant. The application of this in typography leads to concrete applications. It means that a word is a whole that is superior to all its parts. The elephant, uppercase, is a visual block. In lowercase, the eye must follow the shape of these letters, which makes it easier to understand and memorize the information. On the word block, in uppercase, the eyes glides and memorization is weak. So in your PowerPoints, you must avoid capitalizing words and use lowercase letters. 20 points minimum for the body of the text. We have the ability to separate out forms on their background. Here we see either 2 faces in profile or the white vase between them. It's your choice. It's your reading of the image that comes into play. In fact, the difference in perception comes from what you choose to put in the background. White, when you see the two profiles. Black, when you see a vase appear. Principle 2. The field of perception is broken down into form and background. The nature of the background can influence the image and cause perceptual illustrations, as we saw in the previous slide. Your choice of colors. For example, the background you use in your slides or diagrams will make understanding and therefore memorizing information easier or more complicated, depending on whether the colors are more or less contrasted. Here is an example of poor contrast compared to this slide here. Applying this principle, we can see that the combination of font and background colors produce color contrasts that may or may not favor reading at a distance. Here is the ranking of the most readable contrast from a distance, according to J. Bodin and M. Dunant edition. Avoid the dazzling opposition of complementary colors: violet, yellow, blue, orange, and especially red, green. As a reminder, 10 to 15% of the population, colorblind people, do not distinguish well the associations of red and green. You must therefore choose a readable contrast for the images you use, as well as the text you project in your slides. We can thus underline: the greater the contrast, the more readable the text, especially at a distance. However, maximum contrast is not always necessary. For example, dark gray characters will be more readable than black on a white background. An off-white or light gray background would be more pleasant with black characters. The increase in brightness can be compensated by increasing the font size. Is this person from side or the front? Principle 3. Form generates an overall perception. This overall perception leads us to fill in the gaps of a form. For example, we will mentally add the missing features to a figure to make it a face. In a diagram, our brain will try to make connections, fill in the gaps, if it does not clearly perceive the meaning of the diagram. This leads to errors of perception and therefore understanding. Let's apply these principles to video and moving images. Look at this picture. It is composed of circles of blue spots. Two things are going to happen. A yellow spot will form instead of the blue spots. If you don't blink, the blue spots will disappear. This subway train, is it moving in or out of the tunnel? It depends on where you look at. If you look at the foreground, bottom of the picture, you will see the train entering the tunnel. If you look at the tunnel, top of the picture, you will see the train coming out. Does this person turn left or right? It all depends on your perception. As you can see on this slide, the difficulty is to change perception. It's difficult to perceive another direction of rotation once we have made our choice. A misperception or a false interpretation will be imprinted in our brain, in our memory. Change will be difficult. That's why we really have to take care of the visual aids. Visual aids such as images, diagrams, drawings, photos, as well as videos must present simple content that is easy to differentiate. The direction in which visual medium is read affects perception. For European readers, for example, an image or poster is read from left to right and from top to bottom, but this is not the case for everyone. The challenge for trainers is to avoid errors of perception. and to intervene in the memorization of the message. The retention of information is higher if the recipient participates in reading an image. It is also for these reasons that it is important to induce a direction in an orientation in the reading of the image and its perception. As in a sentence where the order of words is important, the placing of graphic elements must be reflected in the bigger picture. Similarly, for photos and videos, we must ensure a good match between what we wish to illustrate and what is actually perceived. If I present tillage by a European farmer to small-scale African producers, will it make sense to them? Is it evocative tillage for them? Images impose meaning because they are subject to interpretation. Your challenge is to use visual aids that are correctly understood and that facilitate the memorization of the messages you wish to convey. Making a visual aid, graphic signs and text. What about understanding signs? There are some signs that can be described as universal. For example, most road signs are universal, although some people's imaginations are still overflowing, as in this picture. Are safety pictograms universal? The interpretation of these pictograms may vary from one region to another, or according to the cultural context. Caution is called for, as the studies of the pictograms used on pesticide labels have shown. Some are misinterpreted and can even lead to accidental exposure. Like images and illustrations, the type, which is the text, is an important element in the perception of the message. The choice of font and size of type, for example, should be considered as carefully as the choice of an image or graphic format. Here, we will consider words as images and the impact of the choice of typography on the legibility of the message. Each typeface can be analyzed through the print produced and assigned a specific use as prescribed in this table. On the basis of this table, stick fonts, that is, sans serif fonts, are more readable and should be used for slides. Don't use italics except for book titles or quotations or species names. As a reminder, the font size as a minimum, 20 point for text, 28 point for titles. No underlining of sentences. No sentences or titles in capital letters or higher case letters. Not too much bold, only to attract attention. Use size change, bold or color to distinguish headings. Be careful with the choice of color in this case.